A while back, I reviewed the Lemokey P1 Pro and found that it was a good combination of features and a wallet-friendly price for what you get. And more recently, I reviewed the Keychron Q1 HE, a Hall effect version that I thought was better than Keychron's mechanical K2. So will the same pattern be true with the P1 HE? Let's take a closer look and see if it's the new best Hall effect keyboard from the brand. Before we dive in, I want to mention that Keychron sent me the P1 HE for the purpose of reviewing it. I was not paid to make this video, and Keychron has no input on my review. I do have a couple affiliate links in the description for you if you're interested in picking up the P1 HE from Lemokey and you'd like to support this channel. The P1 HE is now one of Lemokey's more expensive keyboards at this point, and that is $169, but it's not as expensive as the L line, which all run slightly over $200. They're sort of the equivalent to Keychron's Q series, which, by the way, if you're coming into this not already realizing, Keychron is the parent brand of Lemokey. That's why I'm using them interchangeably. The P1 Pro, which is mechanical but offers the same wireless connectivity, comes in at $129, so the Hall effect P1 HE is $40 more. Now we'll talk more about differences between them shortly, but first let's do our rundown of features and specs for the P1 HE, then we'll do a sound test, and we'll talk pros and cons. The Keychron P1 HE is a 75% keyboard with 81 keys, an encoder knob, and an ANSI layout. An ISO layout is not currently available, but may be in the future. Color options include white and black with shine-through keycaps or black with non-shine-through keycaps. The construction is CNC aluminum for the case top and bottom, and there is a mirror accent on the bottom. The dimensions are 322 by 140 millimeters with a front height of 19.2 millimeters and a rear height of 31.5 millimeters without the keycaps. The weight is 1,630 grams or 3.6 pounds. The typing angle is 5.5 degrees and there are no adjustable feet. Connectivity includes Bluetooth 5.2 for 3 devices with 125 Hz polling, 2.4 GHz with 1000 Hz polling, and USB-C wired also with 1000 Hz polling. The USB-C connection is in the center back next to a mode connection switch. There is no built-in OS mode switch or key command. Internals include a hot swappable PCB compatible with Keychron dual rail magnetic switches, foam between the PCB and the aluminum plate, and another layer of foam under the PCB. The mounting is a silicone bean gasket mount. The stabilizers are screw-in PCB mounted and come with a light lubrication applied. The P1 HE includes Keychron Nebula dual rail magnetic switches, which are factory lubed and have a 40-gram beginning force and a 60-gram bottom-out force. The actuation range can be adjusted between 0.2 and 3.8 millimeters. The keycaps of the shine-through option are Cherry Profile PBT, and the non-shine-through option are Cherry Profile Double Shot PBT. Backlighting is full north-facing RGB with 22 modes, and it can be controlled in the software, but there is currently no per-key control of the lighting. The Keychron Launcher web app allows for control over all settings, including customizable profiles with control for remapping, lighting, performance, and Hall effect customization, such as switch actuation points, rapid trigger, and multiple additional features we'll get into in a moment. The P1 HE is available from Lemokey and Keychron websites for $169 US and on Amazon for $174 US. All right, now let's get into some pros and cons for the P1 HE. We're gonna start the pros off by talking about one thing that's the same as the P1 Pro and one thing that is different from the P1 Pro. The thing that's the same is the build quality. We have excellent all aluminum build quality here. We have a nice mirror accent plate on the bottom, which is unique from Keychron's Q series. The construction of the case is similar to the Q series, but the Q series doesn't have any type of accent on the bottom. We have a nice knob here up in the top right corner. Overall, the case is simple, but the quality, the build quality overall is very nice, and that is the same as what I experienced with the P1 Pro. Now, the differentiator from the P1 Pro is the Hall effect customization that you get here with the P1 HE. As with most HE keyboards, you can go well beyond just remapping and macro creation here, which is what you can do with the P1 Pro. So to customize your P1 HE, you can use the Keychron Launcher web app, which is available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. That includes your Hall effect customization features, your remapping, your macro creation, lighting control, and firmware updates. It's not quite as polished as, say, the Wootility app from Wooting, but it is fairly intuitive, and I had no problems with it. Now, there are 3 available profiles that you can set up differently and switch between using key commands here, and within each profile, you have control over everything. The Hall effect customization includes adjusting your actuation point of the Gateron Nebula dual rail switches. You have a rapid trigger setting, which allows for faster repeated entries without having to fully release a key. And then you also have several advanced features. Snap, click, and last key priority are features that you set up by assigning them to a set of 2 keys. Now, most Hall effect keyboards these days have these features, but different manufacturers just call them different things. Snap click interprets your inputs based on which of 2 keys is pressed down further, and last key priority inputs the key that you pressed last, as the name implies. Last key priority is the feature that some online games have banned because it eliminates some of the lag between player movements. You don't have to release a key before pressing the next key, which means you can move back and forth more quickly. That creates an advantage for anybody that has that feature. Now, there's also dynamic keystroke, which allows you to input several keystrokes by pressing a single key, kind of like a mini macro. It's not unlimited as far as the number of things you can do with one keystroke, but something like Control-Alt-Delete, you can do that in a single press. There's also an analog game controller mode, which allows your computer to interpret inputs based on how far you've pressed keys. Now, one extra small pro I want to point out about the customization is that the encoder knob can be customized and not just to do volume or media controls here. Keychron Launcher allows you to select functions like mouse scroll in the key map editor, and you can change the scrolling to be vertical or horizontal. So those types of things are nice to see. You can assign a lot of different things to the encoder knob, and I really like to see that. And before we leave the customization topic altogether, I want to also call out as a separate pro here that we still have macros included. Just like you can with the mechanical P1 Pro, you can record macros with Launcher and bind them to individual keys on the P1 HE. I'm calling this out as a standalone pro because not all Hall effect keyboards support firmware macros, and as of right now, that includes the Wooting 80 HE. Continuing with pros, we have the wireless connectivity. I had no issues with both the Bluetooth and 2.4 gigahertz connections with the P1 HE. Lemokey and Keychron both use a plastic insert over a cutout in the aluminum case in order to provide a sort of window for the wireless connections to have a more stable connection than if there was just a solid wall of aluminum there. Now, as I said with the K2 HE, having wireless connectivity in addition to the Hall effect customization does come at a little bit of a cost here, but we'll talk about that in the neutral section. Another small pro I want to mention is about the backlighting. While the mechanical version of the P1 has south-facing LED backlighting, the P1 HE has north-facing backlighting, which is much better for shine-through keycaps like these optional ones that you can get. There are shine-through and non-shine-through options available, but the north-facing lighting does a great job illuminating these shine-through keycaps. Speaking of the keycaps, these are cherry profile PBT keycaps, and they don't have a ton of texture to them on top like PBT keycaps usually do, but they're not overly smooth to the point where they feel like they're going to get super shiny, but they show plenty of backlight through the legends. And the one kind of little thing about this set that I have is that the centering is off on a few of them. It's not to the point where I really notice it in daily use. I have to be looking for it to see it, but it is there. It could also vary from one batch to the next. Now, in terms of compatibility, we have good news here. The P1 HE is compatible with Windows, Mac, and Linux, and it should also work with game consoles if you use the key shortcut here to disable N-key rollover. There is something to be aware of, though, if you are a Mac user, and we'll get into that in the neutral section. Now, at the moment, there does not seem to be an ISO layout option available on Lemokey's website, but they do have an ISO version of the mechanical P1, so I'm just going to go on a limb and assume they'll eventually offer the P1 HE in an ISO layout as well. Now, the last pro I want to mention is about the typing feel. Instead of a firm tray mount or top mount like the K2 HE's tray mount, We have a silicone gasket mount in the P1 HE, so the typing feel is not quite as firm and unrelenting. That makes this a bit better for long periods of productivity work. Now, these are not super soft silicone beans that we have for the mounts, and we still have an aluminum plate here. So overall, the feel is still on the stiffer side, especially as far as gasket mounts go. It still does have a more cushioned feel than the K2 HE, which to me is a plus. As far as sound goes, overall, I think it's a pretty inoffensive sound here, but I do have something I want to say that's a little bit more subjective. So let's wrap up the pros and let us move into the neutral category. All right, so kicking off the neutral category, let's finish that conversation about sound and feel. In general, of course, the sound profile and feel are up to you to decide as to whether you like them. I only have one slightly negative thing to say about the sound, and it's possible that it's specific to a couple of switches in my unit. While we do have a silicone mount that we just talked about that should be absorbing some sound here, we still have an aluminum plate, and I hear some spring ping resonance here. It's not that noticeable unless you either put your ear down towards the keyboard or if you really mash a key. However, this wasn't bad enough for me to put it in the cons, so just something to be aware of. There could be a little bit of tinkering necessary to get rid of that if it does bug you. Next up, we have a nearly permanent resident of the neutral category, and that is the design. We have a fairly traditional design here in terms of the case, the physical design. One thing that the P1 has that its more expensive Keychron cousin, the Q1, does not have is a mirror accent on the case bottom. Now, I personally like the case design and that mirrored accent and the overall look of the P1 HE, but that is very subjective, so whether you like it or not, it's going to be up to you. Related to the design, we also have the layout. We have the same 75% layout as the mechanical P1 here, so nothing controversial, but it's still a matter of whether this layout works for you. Lemokey gives us 3 nav keys on the right and a delete key where the F13 key would be, so it's not exactly exploding, pun intended, with extra keys, but you certainly can remap the F row if you don't use some of those keys for their default purpose. All right, there are a couple of small things in the neutral category here that are just worth mentioning in case they're important to you. One is the limited backlight control compared to some gaming keyboards on the market. It's not uncommon for gaming keyboards to have advanced control over the backlighting, including per key control or other features like syncing with your computer, stuff like that. That's not present on the P1 HE. You can change the backlight modes in Keychron Launcher as well as with key commands. You could pick your own custom color if you want a solid color backlight, something like that, but there's no per key control or advanced, fancy modes like some competitors have. We're not quite that advanced here with the P1 HE. Now, another thing to mention is that there is no built-in Mac OS mode for Mac users. You can, however, set up your P1 HE to work just fine with Mac OS, because it's not an OS compatibility issue, it's just that the modifier keys especially are set up for Windows out of the box, and there's no switch to put it into like a Mac mode. So if you only use map, you can go into Keychron Launcher and remap the keys as needed in all of the profiles that you want to set up. If you use both Mac and Windows, you can do it a couple different ways. You could set up one of the 3 profiles as a Mac profile, or you can set up a Mac layer within a profile and use key commands to switch between them. So you won't have a problem using the P1 HE with Mac OS. You just have to do a little manual work to set it up the right way. Next up in the neutral category, we have the battery life. At 100 hours with the lighting turned off, it's not terrible, but also not exactly fantastic compared to other wireless keyboards in general. The mechanical P1 Pro gets up to 200 hours with the lights off, and there are gaming options out there with proprietary firmware that can get months of battery life with the lighting also turned off. So the P1 HE is not breaking any records here, but at the same time, I'm not counting it as a con because there just isn't much competition yet in terms of wireless Hall effect keyboards. And the last thing in the neutral category is the raw performance. This is going to be the same thing pretty much that I said about the Keychron K2 HE. They chose to go for the versatility of wireless connectivity and Hall effect customization rather than going all in on raw performance. For most people, the latency performance is going to be more than enough. Ratings.com has tested the P1 HE and their result for single key latency was 2.9 milliseconds over the wired connection and 5 milliseconds for the 2.4 gigahertz connection. The best out there right now in early 2025 are getting sub 1 millisecond latency over a wired connection by using much higher polling and PCB scan rates, such as the Wooting 80 HE, which ratings.com confirmed has a latency of 0.4 milliseconds. However, this is not something I consider a con, because when it comes to latency performance, for a lot of people, a much bigger variable in terms of your inputs getting from the keyboard to the computer is going to be your own reaction time. For a very high level gamer, going from 5 milliseconds to 0.4 milliseconds could be a noticeable improvement. But for a lot of people, for most people, latency in the range of the P1 HE is going to be perfectly fine. All right, now let's move on and talk about a couple of cons for the P1 HE. And I have to say, I really didn't encounter much that I would say is a downside for everybody. A lot of it's going to come down to all of that stuff we talked about in the neutral category and whether you would consider those things to be a con. But let's talk about a couple things here. The main thing is that the P1 HE is only compatible with Gateron dual rail HE switches available from Keychron. It's not compatible with other Hall effect switches, not even additional ones from Gateron, like their Jade and Jade Pro switches that I personally like. And unfortunately, it's not a firmware thing. It's not a programming thing. They literally cannot be installed. The cutout in the plate seems to be specialized for these nebulous switches. And the PCB is still hot swappable here, so it's kind of a shame that you're limited to just one option for switches with the P1 HE. Now, the only other con that I have really is that if you do prefer non-shine through keycaps, there's currently only one color option. The white color at the moment is only available with shine through keycaps. So if you like the white case, but you don't want shine throughs, you've got to have other keycaps and swap them out. Now, I'm guessing a lot of people are going to like the shine through options, but it is just a little bit of a bummer to only have one color option if you don't want that. Now, with the pros and cons out of the way, let's consider the price and the competition here. At $169, we're comfortably less than the $214 Q1 HE from Keychron, but also $40 more than the P1 Pro, which offers everything here except for the Hall effect customization. At this price, it's a good balance of build quality, customization, and versatility when you consider that you're getting very similar build quality to the Q1 HE and more features than the P1 Pro. It's also got similar customization options to the Wooting 80 HE, but an aluminum case at a cheaper price than the plastic version of the 80 HE. I think for a lot of people, the P1 HE is actually a great option because it really balances premium materials with a wide range of features and all of that customization. So that'll do it for this video. Let me know what you think of the P1 HE. Let me know if you picked one up for yourself and how you're liking it. Don't forget to subscribe to the Semi-Pro Tech and Gear channel, and while you're here, check out one of these videos. I know you'll enjoy it. Thanks everybody. See you next time.